Thanks for watching our podcast. Here at Spear Consulting, our services include business strategy and human resources consulting. In HR, we offer executive search, executive coaching, and work psychology consulting. Please visit us at spiritmco.com, where we fulfill our clients' dreams virtuously. Enjoy your show.
Welcome back to the Leading Virtuously podcast. So pumped and excited and elated to be able to bring you this guest today. Darren, our first question is always, who are you?
Wow, what a deep question. Well, I am, first of all, I'm a Christian. I love God. I love Jesus. No hiding that. I'm a father. I'm a father of three beautiful boys, husband to wife Marie. And actually, my boys are out in the backyard right now, goofing around with the hose. So hopefully we won't be picking up too much of that background noise. But just being a dad, being a husband, such a joy. From a business standpoint, I've got a publishing media company. We specialize in book publishing primarily, and authors need websites and audiobooks and social media, podcasts, things like that. So we offer a whole suite of services with the goal of helping them to get their ideas out to the world. HighBridge Books and Media. And years ago, I was living in New York City in Upper Manhattan. And there's a bridge. It's the oldest bridge in all of New York City, and it connects Manhattan to the Bronx, or vice versa. And it was built back in the 1800s as an aqueduct to bring water into the city. And I was just out praying one day, and I really sensed God saying to me that this company was going to be like an aqueduct to bring life-giving messages to people. And that's what's been happening over the last 7-8 years, that have been helping authors and thought leaders full-time get their message out to the world.
And I think we had an internet lag when you said the name of the company. You said HighBridge, right? Can you repeat that again?
Yeah, HighBridge Books and Media, as in not low but high, bridge that you walk over. Not hybrid. Sometimes people think that's what it is, but no, it's HighBridge, like the High Bridge in New York City.
Awesome. Well, thank you. So, and then, I was just thinking that I retained you for one podcast, but I get 4 of you with the boys in the backyard. So yes, I think it's kind of part of this COVID world that we live in, and is a reality of many of our situations in working from home and parenting at the same time. So I think everyone that listens to the podcast, if they hear that, should be able to have the mercy and grace to understand just where we are all at in our own lives and walk for 2020 and 2021. So, Darren, just really excited to dive into your experience too. Can you tell us how you got to the leadership position that you're in today?
Yeah. So I started back when I was in seminary at Regent University. I was editing doctoral dissertations and working in the academic writing center. They found out that I had a English degree, and so they put me to work while I was in seminary. They're working in the writing center, coaching students on their writing, and people were coming to me for editing services, and so one thing led to the next, and I've got a business editing dissertations. Why don't I see what I can do to help authors with book publishing? And so pretty soon I was editing books, publishing books, and so since then we've published around 110 books in the last 7-8 years, and we've got a team of 3 employees and army of contractors, small army, I should say, of contractors, and just some amazing people that I get to work with every day. And So with this whole COVID thing, um, so much is going virtual, and I've been pretty much virtual since day one. Left Houston, where my chief operating officer is, to move out to the Smoky Mountains in the middle of all this craziness, and we haven't skipped a beat just because everything has just been handled over the internet. It's pretty amazing times and convenient times that we live in.
So I think, one of the things that I love about the fully remote is just like you can expand your workforce in so many different creative ways that I never thought would be possible. And a lot of being a management consultant for executive search, I'm literally hiring not only for myself, but across the country for different clients. And it's been kind of the same trending with that too, especially as they make certain positions fully remote. But I think one of the things that has been kind of hard for me as an operations person is that, we can do all of our meetings, but some of the stuff that you can't do are like the birthday parties and the pizza parties and movies or whatever it may be that your organization is doing to really connect with people. Have you found some creative ways to work around that, Darren?
I'll be honest with you that kind of party time is not my strong suit. And I'm like, if I come into a company, like being the chief fun officer is probably not going to be my job title, but we do have Zoom meetings, and I'm glad you asked that question because it's challenging me to think more about what can we do to make things more fun. But yeah, that's they're probably not the funnest Zoom meetings. It's probably about what you would expect, frankly.
Well, thank you for your brutal candor as well, and you're right that I'm probably in the exact same way that if I was hired for a large organization, I would definitely not be the chief fun officer either. That's my wife. And so yeah. Well, thank you for sharing in that.
Yeah. I mean, before I left Houston, like we would have, like crazy Christmas costume type parties and stuff like that. But it definitely is different when everything is virtual. So I probably need to, if you have a good episode on that, I would love to take a listen to it to see what can be done to just make things more fun. I mean, like we've done a lot of church online, and I've seen some of the innovation that has come through with that, like with our boys. Like, how do you do children's church over the internet? And so we've had them watching, and my wife and I have been watching it too. Elevation Church, they have this amazing kids ministry. It's like the production quality is first class, but so they didn't just say, "Oh no, like we can't get kids to come. I guess we'll just wait until all this blows over." But no, they put together just world-class programs. So certainly not an excuse to be made for just letting things be bland, but just look into those great examples that we have.
Yeah, I've not that you're actually the first person I've asked that question. So I should have been like, spoiler alert, Darren has no idea that this is coming. But one of my clients is the head of HR for one of the largest hospitals in your state, in North Carolina. And she actually has the group they have daily huddles, and then on Fridays they apparently do like dance offs. So I think that's been the most creative thing that I've actually heard of companies being able to do. And yeah, for ourselves, we kind of similar to yourself that usually if it's not actual work and we're doing things beyond that, it oftentimes can be like prayer before different meetings and stuff like that. But beyond that, I guess I could also do a lot of great work towards working towards making some of our staff meetings a little bit more fun and being intentional about that.
Yeah, and I should say that we do pray in our meetings, and we talk about life. We talk about what's going on a personal level, not just what's happening with clients and things like that. I mean, I think that should be a pretty decent chunk of a meeting, to find out how people are doing, like to celebrate good news, not just as it relates to the company, but as it relates to just their personal lives. So that's something that definitely is a priority. But as far as doing like dance offs, and I don't know, I'm not a big fan of meetings to begin with. Like, I'm more of like, let's get back to business. But I think there's definitely a need for spicing things up like that.
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't listening to your response. I was too focused on my next question and don't care about people interpersonally. No, I'm just joking. Yes, and I think that's a big part of the Christian walk, right? Is recognizing that we're all brothers and sisters. And so picking people up when you notice that they are struggling, or just being present, to be able to, regardless of where they're at, to be with them in that walk. So love you sharing that too. The other thing I wanted to talk about is that you are also ex-military, correct? Because
Yeah.
you picked up post-military, so I wanted to dive a little bit into that too.
Yeah. I was a captain in the air, or at least I should say I got out of the Air Force as a captain. Wasn't a captain the whole time. But yeah, from 2004 to 2008, actually on 9/11, 2001, when I saw what happened to the World Trade Towers, I went down to the Commandant of Cadets office there at Charleston Southern University, where I was an English major. And I said, "Sir, I want to join the Air Force." And so I happened to be at one of only two Air Force ROTC programs that had a 2-year program in the whole country. And I was at one of those schools. And so I was able to start up the following year, my junior year, and came out as an officer when I graduated in 2004. And yeah, I just had a really amazing, fulfilling time serving in the military, and spent about 6 months in Kuwait, responsible for all of the Air Force's cargo that was coming into Iraq and Afghanistan, and really the majority of the Middle East by ship. So I'm just coordinating those convoys and airlift and getting all of that cargo where it needed to go once it came into the ports.
So I know that in your bio it says that you had received a medal for your service in Kuwait. Was that what it was for?
Yeah, we did a great job. My team, when we were there, we came in, the reputation of the outgoing officer in charge, and that whole operation had been really, really tarnished. And so we had some rebuilding to do, and my tech sergeant and I, who actually, that tech sergeant ended up being in my wedding, we cleaned it up and got it done. So, but so much of that medal is a credit to him as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing, and thank you for your service. At the same time, I was totally self-centered and focused on myself and not focused at all of, like, my response to that was like, "Oh no, Mom, do you think that I've got to go do service now because we're entering into war due to 9/11?" And it was not like go to register to be able to serve in that way. So that's wildly inspiring, and thank you for sharing and being able to be at such a mature headspace at that point in your life to be able to go and do that.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't exactly say I was mature at that stage in my life. I was a pretty broken down individual on a lot of levels, but as I said, my faith in Jesus at the beginning of this episode, that's kind of where things began for me and God. At least my awareness of what was happening. My dad was my pastor growing up, and he was also a captain in the Air Force in Vietnam. So there was a lot of influence there from him as well.
I'm your brother from the Catholic faith, so I don't know a lot of these little terms that people have been throwing around as I've been interviewing Christians from all sorts of different walks, and it doesn't just have to be Christians for the Leading Virtuously podcast, but I think when a lot of people see the virtue tagline, I think maybe that just resonates better with them, and so that's why we've had more registrations coming from people that identify as Christians, and so just one of the people is also a PK or a preacher's kid, and so just kind of learning that term, that's interesting. And so I'm just also kind of curious as it relates to your own faith walk. So was that something that you have been walking with Jesus your whole life, or was that something that you maybe picked up some steam while in the military, or what did you mean by that comment that you just made?
Yeah, if you know the story of the prodigal son, I think a lot of people can probably relate to that son that, like I said, I grew up in church. My dad's my pastor, and I pretty much, like the prodigal son, I just squandered my spiritual inheritance and just decided I was going to do my own thing and just lived pretty recklessly and gotten some trouble with the law, which by the grace of God, the Air Force was willing to overlook at that time because there was such a great need for officers to come in with all the uncertainty about what was happening and with the military engagements that were on the horizon and happening even at that time. That was when I woke up on that morning, and my roommate told me what had happened, and then I looked at the TV. Something just really shifted in me, and there was like an awakening of some sense of purpose in my life. Like I've got to do something with my life because I just really had nothing going for me at that time, and God really used that decision to join the Air Force to really restore and to develop me as a man and as a Christian. And so I'm just so grateful that I had that opportunity, despite the tragic circumstances that precipitated that in my life.
Well, thank you for also being vulnerable enough to be able to share that too, and I'm happy that you had that awakening and are able to inspire the people that you're inspiring now with the work that you're doing as well in media and publishing. But what I also think is so interesting, because I also really hit to the bottom of the pit hard, like it sounds like your story was too, and then it's just like the empathy that comes when you have to struggle through that. Just like people that maybe just maybe they like stay stale but never like go like, okay, I'm coming up with the faith walk and just like nosedive, like in that particular type of story you just can meet people at such a deeper level than people that have never really been able to feel that amount of like suffering and pain to be able to experience and meet with people in those moments as you're talking to them and witnessing about your walk with Jesus.
Right. Yeah, the empathy is huge. I think that's how, despite Jesus was completely sinless, I mean, he just loved people and he listened to them and he found out what they wanted in life and he didn't just he was willing to meet their physical needs first before addressing their deeper spiritual needs. In fact, I wrote a whole book on marketing like Jesus and how it's not particularly a theological book, but I noticed what an amazing, as we all know, influencer Jesus was and is for those of us who know him now. I wanted to look at the Gospels and see what are the marketing practices and strategies that Jesus seemed to be using in his ministry that we could take and apply in the products, services, causes that we're marketing in our vocations presently. And so I was able to identify about 26 of those in the Gospels.
So I want to dive into some of that too. So if you give us some tidbits on that, but usually, like at this point, I would be asking our guests, where does business and virtue intersect for us? But as long as you kind of like brought us down to kind of like where you were before you started the upward trajectory, can you speak to a little bit about some of the vices that you had to overcome, which is usually my follow-up question to like, okay, now you communicated how you're, starting to lead virtuously and doing all this great work. And then after that question, usually the follow-up is like, all right, well, what was some of the things that you had to overcome of yourself so that Jesus could be more present in the way that you lead? And so as long as we're there, I was just thinking that maybe we could talk about that first, and then we can dive into the second question, which would be then you maybe speaking to about what you found as some of those key learnings from the way that Jesus was marketing.
Yeah. Regarding the vices, I think what it all boiled down to was just a lot of insecurity, just a very deep level of insecurity, of not really feeling. And I think there's kind of two sides to the coin where there is a deep human need to want to matter in life, which I think is part of what prompted me to go down to the ROTC department on 9/11. But there's a more insidious aspect of that where we feel like we have to prove ourselves and that we are that we have to prove ourselves to the world, that we have to build up our resume and our bios so that we can feel validated. And so it's not like the Bible teaches to let another praise you, like let another, and yeah, a good name is worth more than gold. It says that too. But I think what we have a lot of nowadays, and what was going on really with me at that time, was let me prove how good I am, and whatever the measuring stick for that is, which differs. When you're in high school, for me in high school, around a bunch of athletes and wrestlers fighting and drinking, and who like it never occurred to us that maybe one beer is okay. Well, it's not okay if you're underage, but maybe you don't need to drink a whole 12-pack, like it just never really, I think, occurred to a lot of us at that time. And just having to like constantly feel like we have to prove ourselves. I think it may appear a little more mature the older we get, but still, if we don't deal with that insecurity and really find our identity in our Creator, who's the one that ultimately made us and knows why He made us, then we're just going to be continuously going in that rat race, just trying to, in whatever sphere of peers we're in, constantly trying to prove ourselves. And social media, of course, is LinkedIn is for guys like us. That's where you can go on LinkedIn, look through the feed, and it's like it kind of become, you can start to you know what I'm talking about, where you're like, am I doing enough? Do I matter enough? Am I successful enough. On Instagram, Facebook, like they're all different. I think maybe Facebook is more like, how successful are you with your family? Like that you're traveling, that you're doing upgrades to the house or this and that. And on LinkedIn, it's who's getting the promotion and who's getting the new contracts. And I think every platform is celebrating something different, but the issue has to be settled on a daily basis with, do we actually matter? And it really starts with discovering our creator. And I was just listening to an interview with Elon Musk, just talking about, and they were like, why are you doing this? Like, why is it so important to you to go find out what's, beyond the stars and Mars and everything? And he said, well, basically, it's to find out what the meaning of life is. So it's like this self-licking ice cream cone. The more you want to push and I'm all for innovation and, pushing the limits and everything, but we should really start with that question of why. What is this about? And so that's kind of a long answer to a question that I forgot what it was.
Sorry, I gave you like a 5-minute rant to give you the question in the first place. But the question was, what vices do you have to overcome in order to obtain virtuous leadership? So I think you nailed it of just saying that, it was really all about you and just trying to validate your own self with all the things that you could accomplish. And yes, I think that resonates incredibly well with my own story. And then as you were talking about Elon Musk, the other thing that came to mind was there's this interview with Tom Brady. I forget what outlet it's on, but he'd already won a couple Super Bowls. And then the interviewer is like, so what's next for you, Tom? And he's like, I don't know. It's like, I guess I'll just win more. I don't know what else I could do. Like, are you happy? And he's just basically like, no. Like, I guess. And how are you going to find happiness? He's like, I don't know. I guess I'll just have to keep winning Super Bowls. And it's like, I was just like, oh man, like it's just like for obviously for us having been able to walk with Jesus and just fall in love in that way and find our purpose and find that relationship with our Creator and recognizing that life is really about loving Him, knowing Him, and serving Him. And that's where you really find fulfillment. That when you hear stuff like that, your heart almost breaks. It's like, like I wish there was, like, you just start to pray, like, Lord, send some Christian to witness to Him, because like being able to just present the gospel is just such an easy win there. So yeah. The other thing that came to mind that I wanted to share with you is my patron saint is Francis of Assisi, or Saint Francis. And it's so like, Darren, I don't know if you've read anything about him, but you should. Like, it's crazy the commonalities of what you had just communicated of like, I need to matter and I need to like validate myself in the world. That was like, and then basically then go register for military. That was exactly the same thing that Francis had done as well. So yeah, I thought that was interesting. So now let's segment into diving into virtue and leadership, and maybe some of those. I don't know if you're gonna, like, I guess I'm answering the question for you yourself, so I'm not going to do that. Let me take a step back. So the question is, where does virtue and leadership intersect for you, Darren?
Yeah, well, when I think about leadership, I see it really more as a byproduct of good management. And I know there's this big dichotomy between, don't be a manager, be a leader. People don't want to follow managers; they want to follow leaders. And I get all of that, but for me, God is the leader, and I'm following Him, and everything that I'm trying to do is be a good steward, a good manager of what He's given me to do, whether it's decisions He's entrusted me to make or resources that He's entrusted to me. And so that's that's kind of my prevailing worldview when it comes to management and leadership and how I think of myself and what I'm supposed to be a manager. Now, do people follow me as a result of my management? I think that makes me a leader insofar as people are willing to do that, and they do to some extent. Um, and so, and I think with that, the virtuous aspect of management. I know you asked about leadership, but in practice, it comes down to leadership comes down to management for me. It's the Bible says that Jesus is the chief cornerstone, and so of course the cornerstone is the first block laid in on a building, and if that one is not, and every other brick comes into alignment with that cornerstone, and so it begs a question for me of what does that mean? How is Jesus the cornerstone of my marketing and my HR practices and my accounting and all of the different facets of my business? And for that, I look to what are the biblical principles, and in prayer, what is God saying to me about how to proceed, like the why and the how of marketing, and the why and the how of HR and accounting and all the other facets of it. So that's kind of it in a nutshell for me.
Mm. Yeah. Boom, nailed it. And because, and I think it's interesting too, because, there are people of different spiritualities that come on the show, and I think that one of the benefits that Christians have with that is like, and maybe, there's, if you would look at other religions, they have prayer. And so there's that meditation, discernment, etc., that goes along with that. But just, I guess the way that you kind of answer that and the way that I kind of think about through like management and leadership, it's each individual decision that you're making and just being able to have that opportunity to pray through it and think about like, all right, I don't know if I have the answer right now. Let me get back to you after I talk to the cornerstone, and being able to like set yourself on the right pathway. And I'm just curious if you can maybe give some examples of, one of my questions is also about like, what virtue are you presently working on? But I guess I wanted to phrase this a little bit differently about like, can you maybe think of some examples where maybe Darren was going down the wrong road in management and then being able to kind of like, get in prayer the right direction that you needed to head as it related to some business decisions that you needed to make?
Yeah. Well, even just yesterday, or maybe it was the day before, I was looking at our pricing for some of our services, and there was one in particular, and you know how we don't want to call it $1,400. We want to call it $1,399, $1,397, and so I found myself in these sales calls talking with prospective clients and telling them this price, and I would just say it's about $1,400. That's what it is. But for some reason on the website it says $1,397, and the Bible says in Proverbs, a false weight is an abomination to the Lord, which, suffice it to say, basically means don't try to hide stuff. Like, don't try to be tricky, and because it's actually an abomination to our Creator. And it just hit me like it's not worth it. Let me just call it $1,400, because I'll sleep better at night, and I won't feel like I'm trying to like trick somebody. And I understand there's arguments to be made for, well, you want to incentivize people to help them do what's best for them I think you can do that without trying to be tricky. And so I just, across the board for this particular service, just made it a flat, we're going to advertise it as a flat $1,400. So that's just one example of how I really try to lean into what I sense God is saying and what the scriptural principles of business that are running throughout the Bible, and then pray about what does that look like because if you just say, oh, the Bible says an abomination or false weight is an abomination to the Lord. Well, that's a reference to scales that were being used back in the ancient Near East, where if you were rich and you're going to sell like a certain amount of spice or precious metal or something like that, you've got the scale, and you know if it's truly calibrated ethically, like you know if it's going to be to your advantage or not. But the poor people that you're selling to that don't have their own scales to verify, that's why it's called a false weight. And so while I'm not actually using weights, a system of weights in that scenario, it's kind of, the principle is obvious. Don't try to trick people in your marketing.
Well, as long as we're headed down that road, so thank you for that. And as long as we're headed down that road, can you maybe tell us a little bit? I'm just also curious. I've watched your podcast episode on the book, Marketing Like Jesus. I have not read the book thus far. Can you maybe give us some more, some of those things that were also a little bit eye-opening to you as you started to do that research and write the book about the way that Jesus was marketing?
Yeah, one of the strategies that I really liked, and when we think about Jesus and how God so loved the world that he gave his only son, and Jesus's vision was to go make disciples of all nations. So he had this massive vision, but for his limited time on earth, he said, I have come for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And so he was basically saying, my personal mission is not to go get on a boat and go explore uncharted territory and share the gospel, but the boat that I'm going to go around the Sea of Galilee. I'm going to go to this very small ethnic group of the people of the house of Israel, the Jewish people, but they were the lost sheep of the house of Israel. So there were people that were on the fringes of the society. So like the blue collar workers. That's why he's got fishermen on his core team. That's why really Jesus himself was a blue collar worker. That's how he was raised, and those were the people. And so he uses these familiar kind of illustrations to share his message, called parables. And about a third of it, this is really another strategy in how Jesus told stories. He didn't just share facts and figures, which is what we often like to do when we're trying to sell something. But he told a story of a life changed, like the story of the prodigal son, because he was trying to illustrate the love of the father. He told the story of this young guy that had just thrown it all away, left his father's house, came back empty-handed, and his father ran to him. That's a whole lot more effective than just spouting off facts and features about what it is that you're offering. So I would say having a target group is one, and using stories to share your message is another. And really, if you can distill your overall company's message down into a story, which is why I like to tell the story about how the name HighBridge came about for my company when I was walking down the street, and I really sense God saying to me that this company is going to be like an aqueduct, like that HighBridge, to bring life-giving ideas to the masses. And that's I think that's more powerful.
Well, I absolutely love it. So thank you for sharing that with us. And I think that there's been a lot of that life-giving knowledge and wisdom that you've shared with our audience today. Pre-roll, we talked about the fact that, sometimes depending upon the person's walk, I'll usually ask for prayer before podcast episodes, but I've never had the courage to be able to do it within the podcast itself. And so I'm going to go ahead and ask you, Darren, if you wouldn't mind leading us out in prayer. And if you, in the same way, I'm going to steal this concept from you, Darren, of being able to pray for us in the same way that you do it, where it's like, that person's subject matter expert, to be able to share that with the audience. So can you do the same for our audience, Darren?
Yes. All right. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this show. Thank you for Chris. Thank you for his heart to help people lead virtuously. And God, you're the leader, and ask you to show us how to lead, how to manage, and to do it in a way that is honoring to you, that's good for people, and that you would root out those deep insecurities that we have that get us to just chase after selfish ambition and things that will never, ever satisfy, but that we would find our identity in you and go to you for the why and the how of leadership, of management, of marketing, of everything else that we're doing in our organizations, and pray your blessing over every listener, that you would just show them what the next step is for them in their leadership. And thank you again for this opportunity to be on this wonderful show with this amazing person, Chris. In Jesus' name, amen.
Darren, while you were sharing, well, the other thing that I told you that I haven't specifically done thus far has been prophesying on the show. So I'm going to dig deep and accomplish 2 of those goals today. So as you were just praying for our listeners, Darren, the image that I was getting was one of those old school mixtapes, like before CDs, that people were just like, oh, making people's mixtapes and basically in order to do that, really recording stuff off of the radio of their favorite songs to be able to have. And I feel like the reason why the Lord was sharing that image with me is because that's the way that He sees your work, Darren. All of the books that you're publishing and all the media and everything that you're cranking out, the way that Jesus sees that is that is His mixtape. You're just wanting His just absolutely just loving what you're sharing with people. And then also in the same way, I was kind of sensing that it's also some of the books that you've been publishing and all that can also be people's mixtapes, that this is just what they love, and this is something that they just so hold so near and dear to them. So thank you for the work that you're doing, and just curious, Darren, too, how that resonates with you.
Yeah, well, it's deeply encouraging, just to think of my life, and I think other serial entrepreneurs can kind of relate to feeling well, I'm doing so many different things, but I don't. You don't always know what that one thing is. What does this all boil down to? And I do feel like God has given me a clear sense of what that one thing is, which is to really encourage marketplace Christians to make Jesus the cornerstone of what they're doing in the business world, and but just the thought of that being a mixtape and all the different things that I've been doing, it's encouraging. So thank you for that.
Yeah, no worries. Well, thank you again for being with us today. And Darren, please answer our very last question, which is, how can people get a hold of the work that you're doing?
Yeah, if you want to get a hold of more teaching about how to discover and apply God's will for business, go to theologyofbusiness.com. And if you're interested in publishing a book or an audio book or publishing your ideas in another format, go to highbridgebooks.com and reach out to me there.
Wonderful. And we'll also share all of these links with our listeners in the show description as well. But couldn't thank you enough for being on the podcast today and sharing all this wisdom with our listeners. Really enjoyed getting to know you better as well, and look forward to continuing our relationship as well, Dan.
Sounds good, Chris. Thanks again.
Yep.
Hey, Chris here. Hope you enjoyed the episode where we discussed all things going bald. Just joking. The Leading Virtuously podcast. If you enjoyed the episode and the podcast, will you please subscribe on YouTube or Apple Podcasts or Spotify? Or you could also share it with a friend. That would be tubular. I hope you have an awesome day.